All right, guys, let's get started because there's a lot Ethan is going to cover about the JMT. First, I'll introduce myself. I'm your host for this evening. My name is Coyne. My trail name is Cheer. I'm the founder of a long distance hiking community called Thru-Hiker, which is short for Thru-Hiker. And so I myself have hiked the Triple Crown. I've hiked the JMT, and I started this long distance hiking community because I felt a loss of community after I got off of these trails. We include through hikers of longer distances. We include through hikers of maybe medium distances like the JMT, and even like the Tahoe Rim Trail. So if you'd like to join us, we offer everything for free for our members, our community members. It's been really fun over the years. I started in 2020 and we've been doing these Zoom meetups ever since. We're doing in-person meetups. We have an online community. We have a Facebook group. We have a podcast called the Thru-Hiking podcast, which this recording is going to be on. So I'll put all of the links to Thru-r if you're interested in the chat once we get started in case you want to get involved with us. And we are working with Ethan today. I did interview him. We've met before in person at the Triple Crown ceremonies through all the West. So really happy to have Ethan on and talk with him again and kind of moderate this presentation today. Ethan Poe Gallogly. So happy to have you back and thank you for taking time to do this. I know this is going to be really great information for aspiring JMT hikers out there.
Thank you for having me, Carol.
Yes,
I really appreciate it.
We're so happy to have you. You're the author of the Amazon bestseller, The Trail. If you guys have not read this book or even better, listen to the audiobook, amazing. Great story. I feel like it really paints an accurate picture of hiking, doing a long distance hike on the JMT. I cried multiple times. It's a beautiful story. And if you actually read the book, there's so many great illustrations on their map. So highly recommend. And you've also hiked the JMT multiple times, part of the PCT, the Theodore Solomon's Trail. So you have a lot of experience in the backcountry. So with that, Ethan, I'm gonna let you take the mic. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you again, Carol. I really appreciate you having me. And thank everyone for coming and everyone who's watching the recording. As Carol said, I've been backpacking the Sierra for over 30 years now. I've been a reviewer on a number of hiking guides to the Sierra. The JMT specifically I've done, I don't know how many times if you count sections, but as through hikes, I've done it 2.5 times, and I'll get into that. And I've done it in both directions and in pleasant weather and in snow. So I've seen it in its different faces. So when I turned 50, I'm dating myself here, but that was 9 years ago. When I turned 50, it was the first time I thru-hiked the JMT. I set out to do it with a friend and with my wife, and I took 28 days to do it, and it was absolutely transformational. And let me just start this PowerPoint. So when I was 50, I hiked the JMT for the first time, and it was my first long distance hike. I think the longest thing I'd done before was about a week. And it was absolutely transformational for me. The people I met, the things I saw, the places I visited, even though many places I touched before, it was a very different experience as a full wilderness immersion. And I wanted to share that with people. And when I got out, I was a professor in Santa Monica, and I got scheduled or on schedule to give a talk about the JMT. And as a professor, I diligently prepared. I looked up everything I didn't know, the history, the background, all this stuff. And I was really excited. And some other person, as I recall, with a Nobel Prize, took my time slot. And my talk was preempted. And I was disappointed, but I thought, I've got enough material here for a book. I've got enough story to tell. But who's going to read a book about the history of the JMT or my particular through hike, which, it was interesting, but I don't think it was quite so eventful. I really wanted to reach a broader audience. And so I put together a novel with two fictional protagonists, Gil and Sid, and I take them on a trip on the JMT. And everything in the book, in terms of place, is true. So the days that they spend on trail, those were the days I spent on trail. The mileage was the same mileage I did, the same campsites, and all the history is true. So all the trail descriptions in history are true. It's just, and many of the characters are actually real people or composites I'd met. So it's a very realistic book. It's just that the story itself, of course, is fiction to draw more people into it and get more people excited about hiking and excited about the John Muir Trail. So that's the book. It's won a couple of awards. It's been doing very well. So I want to talk now about the Muir Trail. And if you go out there, you see these lovely metal signs. And if you just look at a map of the Muir Trail, it looks fairly innocent. It's 211 miles from Yosemite Valley to the summit of Mount Whitney. The actual trail is a tad longer because you're not going to end on the summit of Mount Whitney, right? You're going to have to hike down to Whitney Portal or maybe Crabtree Meadow and, not Crabtree, Cottonwood Pass and come out, right? Get back to your car. So from the summit of Whitney down to the portal, I think it's another 12, 14 miles. So call it 220, 225 miles roughly from end to end. Doesn't look too bad. But this is not the map someone who plans to hike the JMT should be looking at. We should be looking at this one. This is the real challenge of the JMT, is the change in altitude, right? You're going from 4,000 here at the beginning up to about 9,700, right? That's a huge climb. That's a crazy huge climb. And then you go down and up and down and up and down and up again and again. Most days on the JMT, you'll be doing 2,000 to 3,000 feet of climbing, which is quite a bit. I can't stress enough how difficult that is. That's a huge amount of climbing every day. And then it's not just climbing down here at sea level, you're climbing at altitude, right? Here's 10,000 feet. Most of the trail is above 10,000 feet, and most of the passes hit 11, even 12, even 13, and if you go over Whitney, 14,500, 14,505 if you're counting. So you're getting up to some really high altitudes. Altitude sickness can be an issue. Climbing daily miles, it's some very arduous terrain. Throw in weather and other stuff, and it can be quite difficult. So, don't ever judge the JMT by this map. You want to look at the altitude profile. And if you're planning a trip on the JMT, and I hope most of you are, because it's a wonderful life transforming journey, even to do sections at a time, if that's all you can handle, is wonderful. And, we'll talk about that. But to do it as a through hike is fantastic. One of the questions I'm often asked is, do I prefer it northbound or southbound? Do I prefer to start from the valley and go to Whitney, or from Whitney and go to the valley? And first off, it's hard to start from Whitney. You've got to get up the portal. The permit's difficult to get. Most people, if they're doing it that way, you'd be starting at Cottonwood Pass and then going to Crabtree, and you're allowed to summit Whitney on that permit and going north to the valley. And forgive me a little bit if my voice cuts out. I was on the PCT a week ago and I got a minor throat infection. I'm told I'm not contagious, but just in case, check that your virus filters are all working on your computer. I don't want anyone getting a computer virus from this talk. Just kidding, obviously. But, you know, northbound or southbound? Is it better to start at Cottonwood and go to north to Yosemite, or better to start at Yosemite and go south? And by far, because I've done it both ways, I prefer southbound. I prefer starting in the valley or starting at Tuolumne and going to Whitney. And why do I prefer that? Well, first, you end up with these cohorts of other JMT hikers who are really interesting, and I really enjoy that part. Not that you don't meet cohorts going the other way, but you also run into PCTers and some tougher hikers going northbound. But going southbound's a little more gentle in terms of the population, and at least as I found it. But what I really like is that you acclimate to the altitude much more naturally going southbound. You start out down here at Cathedral at 9.7, and then Donahue, which is a hard climb because the steps are uneven, but Donahue at 11, and then Island doesn't even seem like a pass. Silver's not too bad. And eventually you build up to Mather and Pinshot and Glen and Forester, right? And at the end, you summit on Whitney. The end of your trail is being up on Whitney, the high point, and then you can hike out and get a burger or whatever you want at the end. So I find it more dramatic and more kind of uplifting to go southbound. I don't want to take away from someone's northbound experience. Northbound is interesting in other ways, and all the passes are different, whether you approach them north to south. And in snow and so forth, there are some advantages to going northbound, but both are interesting. If you have a choice, I'd take southbound. That's just my 2 cents. I found it much more moving. So that always comes up. So when I did my trip, and this talk is going to be in 3 parts. I'm going to talk a little bit about my hike, some slides of my trip and some highlights, just because, it's nice to see what you're getting into. Then I'm going to talk about practical matters. How do you succeed at the JMT and what can go wrong? And then I'm going to talk about gear. I'm going to switch over to another camera, dive into my pack, and show you what I carry. That doesn't mean it's what you should carry, but it'll give you an idea of what to bring and hopefully a bit of what not to bring. And if you really want to understand what not to bring, read my book. Look at what Gil brought. So when I did this trip, um, I did 28 days, and it wasn't easy to find people who could do 28 days. My wife couldn't, she had work. So I split it. And for the first half, my friend Joey accompanied me. And Joey is an amazing hiker. We had a wonderful time. He had this great tent. This is from Six Moon Designs. It's a lunar duo, and it was super light. I had a Hubba Hubba, just like somebody you may remember from my book, a 4-pound tent. Big lesson there, right? In fact, while Joey went in with a very nice light pack, and I learned quite a bit, I, as a short distance hiker, had a 55-pound pack. I lugged 55 pounds over the entire JMT. I'll never do it again. Never. So this was my pack going in. It was a disaster, but I did it. So a lot to be learned here, a lot of mistakes, and a lot of extra gear. And when you read the things that Gil was doing in my book, um, a lot of those were me, a lot of mistakes. And when we did the book, I was very fortunate to have Jeremy Ashcroft illustrate a lot of the scenes. And this is the bridge as you go in from Tuolumne Meadows, this beautiful split bridge. And again, these are just some highlights of the trail. One of my favorite places on trail, Thousand Island Lake. This is a place, if you're thinking like, where should I camp? Camp here. It is just so gorgeous. And not just by day, but also at night. I took this shot just lying by Thousand Island Lake with a little Sony camera, and just gorgeous, gorgeous night scenes. And then from there, you go down to Red's Meadow, and I'm only going to hit some highlights. There's this hilarious sign as you come in, but I'll let you read it when you get there. And then I took a detour. Again, I've done all these sections, but with Joey and I, we went up to Iva Bell Hot Springs, which is a little bit off trail, but I highly recommend this detour. This is one of the most beautiful hot springs in the Sierra. Open all night. You don't have to pay. You just soak in it under the stars. This is actually one of the hot pools there. Jeremy illustrated it in the book, and there's a beautiful scene at the hot spring in my story. But a nice detour, and you can actually go there. It's like 13-mile detour, and then wind back across Second Crossing, come up to Purple Lake, and you won't have missed a huge amount of the trail. One caveat there. There's no bridge at Second Crossing. It's a hard crossing in a heavy water year, so you don't want to attempt second crossing unless it's probably about August. But you can go the old way up by Lake of the Lone Indian and around to Silver Pass, and there's no dangerous water crossing that way. So just be advised if you're going to make this detour, look at your map and understand your options and know the water level down on Fish Creek because that second crossing in early season is no joke. So we went from Iva Bell up to Silver Pass. This is Joey and I up on Silver Pass. And what you can see in the background are the minarets. These are the peaks over by Thousand Island Lake. So you get this sweeping view all the way back almost to where you started. And you can see the minarets quite far into the trek. I think we could see them almost as far as Seven Gables. So you really see the minarets quite far as you're going along. Beautiful volcanic peaks. We got on this trip, we skipped VVR. We went to Muir Trail Ranch. In those days, you could reserve a cabin there. Now it's kind of hit or miss. But we went to Muir Trail Ranch. I recommend strongly a stop at VVR. I find VVR to be fantastic, but the two have different cultures. VVR is a little more of a party scene, barbecue, beer, but quite nice, and you can get showers. Muir Trail Ranch, a little more sedate. They have hot spring pools if they allow you in. If they don't, there are pools across the San Joaquin River, but fording the San Joaquin River is really tough, usually late August, unless it's a very low water year. This being an average water year, I'd suspect late August for crossing the San Joaquin. But Muir Trail Ranch also very attractive. And a lot of people ding Muir Trail Ranch for the cost of holding a bear can, but not a bear can, a resupply. I think it's up to 75 bucks or something now. But when you understand the logistics of it, the fact that they're hauling it in from town on this awful road, then ferrying it across the lake, and then muling it up to Muir Trail Ranch and holding it for you, you begin to understand why it's so expensive. And it's a legitimate charge. They're not making a ton of money off you. It's difficult to get the packages there. If you'd go the other way out Florence Lake, you'll understand what they're going through to get you your resupply. So this was at MTR. There's Joey. Here are a couple of the folks who I met on trail. Some of these folks actually became characters in my book, but we're not going to get into that. And here's Evolution Valley and the Hermit. Beautiful, beautiful area. This is the area that Theodore Solomons discovered in quotes, because I'm sure he wasn't the first, but he was the first to document it. And you come up from Evolution Valley to Evolution Lake, absolutely stunning, jaw-droppingly gorgeous. Evolution Lake at night from the other direction. We drew a picture of it in the book. And if you cross these stones on Evolution Creek, which is another fun crossing, you come to Sapphire Lake. This is the outflow of Sapphire Lake. Now, there's a huge debate online, and I'll weigh in on this too. Which is better for camping? Should I camp at Sapphire or Evolution? And you'll see this on all the JMT sites every year. And people will always post, oh, we camped at Evolution. It was wonderful. Oh, I camped at Sapphire. Well, listen, I've camped at both. I had to. I had to experience both. And they're both wonderful. They're both absolutely wonderful. The difference, Sapphire gets better alpenglow. You get much more dramatic play of the sun on the rocks, and it's much quieter. So if you're looking for a bit more wilderness experience and those beautiful glows on the rocks, I think Sapphire is the place. On the other hand, if you're looking for more people and great swimming and just beautiful views of the mountains and so forth, Evolution. And Evolution, as you can see, just is beautiful in the sunset too. So you can't go wrong at either. But because they're next to each other, it's always a debate. From Evolution Lake, we come up to the Muir Hut. absolutely striking, beautiful. You can go inside. Little word of warning: if you go inside, watch your pack. The marmots up here are vicious. If you've got food in your pack, they will rip into it, as I've seen. The ceiling work in the Muir Hut, absolutely gorgeous. We'll talk a little bit about the history of the Muir Hut, and in the book, we had an illustration. As you come down from the Muir Hut, do not miss the rock monster. There's Joey and the rock monster. This is off the trail to the right, coming down. It's easy to see typically going southbound, going northbound. You have to keep turning your head to find it. So just be careful. It's a little after Big Pete Meadow, as I recall. But the rock monster. And then we got down to, this was on my first hike of the JMT. We got down to LeConte Canyon, and I had to say bye to Joey, and my wife came in. And my wife came in on horseback. And this was because she was bringing our resupply for the next 12 days. So enough food to get us to Whitney over Bishop Pass. And I wasn't going to make my wife, on her first couple of days, climb Bishop Pass with enough food for two of us. That would be ridiculous. I'd have been divorced in, a day. I mean, it would have been awful. So, to keep her happy and keep me happy and make it in, she brought it in on horseback through Rainbow Pack Outfitters, which is a wonderful group that you can actually pay to bring in a resupply over Bishop Pass. There's also, I think, D. Burner will bring in resupplies by mule or horse over Kearsarge Pass. And there's another group that can do this for you to Road's End. We're not going to get into all these details, but they're out there. They're also expensive, but you can split it with other folks. So, in our case, I just ate the price, but it's good to share. Another word of warning here: if you're going to do a horse resupply, watch your timing. We had a little extra time, so we actually spent a Nero day, a near zero, waiting on my wife to come in. But you don't want to be tight for time if you're depending on a resupply like this. And we'll talk about where you can resupply. My friend Joey, he got to ride out on the horses. So we swapped. My wife came in with the resupply, Joey hiked out, and my wife brought fried chicken, which was just wonderful. We then went through Grouse Meadow, which is just beautiful. There she is enjoying the trip. And of course, first thing we hit, the Golden Staircase. This was the last part of the John Muir Trail to be completed, along with Forester Pass. And just look at the zigzags here going up the Golden Staircase. This was all cut into the rock. This is a huge switchbacky climb, but you're rewarded at the top with Palisade Lakes and a view of the Palisades, which are some of the tallest peaks in the Sierra. There's a 14er here, or maybe two of them. And you also get Mount Bolton Brown, and again, beautiful alpenglow. Another place I'd recommend camping, if for no other reason than the climb up to Mather Pass is equally brutal going southbound. So it's good to break it up here. As I said, going up to Mather, lots of rocky switchbacks, a hard climb. But we got up to Mather Pass, very excited, and continued north over Pinshot up to Ray Lakes. And here is the famous Pyramid Peak. Well, it's what Bolton Brown, the artist, named Pyramid Peak. Unfortunately, William Colby, who renamed a lot of the landscape up at Ray Lakes, which was originally named for Bolton Brown's wife and daughter, Bolton Brown named this Pyramid Peak. William Colby of the Sierra Club gave it the unfortunate name, the Colored Lady. I don't know what to say about that, but in the 60s, they tactfully renamed it the Painted Lady. But I think Pyramid Peak was a much nicer and more apropos name. But beautiful mountain, gets beautiful alpenglow. And right up there by Ray Lakes and Findome, which is one of the names Bolton Brown gave it that stuck. He envisioned a big dragon going along here, but only the fin of his naming scheme stays. Ray Lakes is another place I highly recommend camping at. It's tempting to stop at the Woods Creek Bridge because you'll be tired, but if you can push on to Ray Lakes, much more beautiful, and it sets you up nicely for Glen Pass. I really recommend that. Going up to Glen Pass, you go up Bubbs Creek, which is gorgeous. I caught this nice shot in the alpenglow, and you can just see this is just a taste, a sample of what you're going to see and experience on the JMT. It's fantastic. And then we went up Forester Pass in a hail and snowstorm. The scene in my book where Gil goes up Forester, that's reality. My wife and I were snowed on, and you can't really see the snow up here. I wish I had better photos. They didn't come out. But by the time we got, that's the top of Forester, by the time we got over to the other side, we were in a cloud, in a whiteout, and it was difficult coming down. In fact, a ranger went up after us to make sure people got over it. That was in August. And I want to stress that August, we were snowed on Forester Pass. People will post questions about, do I need my puffy to go on the JMT in July? Yes, you do. Do I need rain gear? Yes, you do. Should you be prepared for snow? Yes. Right? So the conditions are surprising up in the mountains and in the Sierra, right? We hiked miles and miles of snow coming down from Forester Pass, had to do a route finding wasn't that hard, but had to follow, the trail in the snow and eventually came out of the cloud. So that was August, right? Not as bad, though, as 2019. Just show you a picture from late May of 2019. These are the PCTers, a very famous picture, coming over Forester Pass. And you don't have to worry about this year. In fact, right now, I know as a fact, Forester Pass is mostly clear of snow. Not entirely, but mostly. I've got friends on the PCT who've come over Forester recently. It's not too bad. This being an average year, I think most of you, unless you're going in right now, don't need to worry about snow. And again, unless you're going in right now, you'll probably be okay without crampons or ice axe. But this was 2019, a whole different year, a deep snow year. And so knowing the year and being prepared makes a big, big difference. But you can see all different weather up there. We're going to come back to snow. This is coming up to Whitney. And does anybody know what this is? Give you a hint. I talk about it in my book. That's the sky pilot up on Whitney, and you'll see this. It's a beautiful little plant. Doesn't smell so nice, but it's beautiful. It smells better than the poodle dog bush on the PCT, though, I'll tell you that. So coming up Whitney, you have these huge fields of snow and these peaks. But my wife and I did get to the top of Whitney. I was ecstatic. I cried when I reached Whitney. I really did. The Whitney Hut up there. And then, of course, after Whitney, you hike down and what else? You can get yourself this is not a BLT, but get yourself a BLT. This is a chicken BLT, right? And if you've read the book, you know why I'm showing that. So that was 2016, which was a year very similar to this year in terms of snow. I went back to Thru-Hike, the JMT, and check my book, right? I wanted to make sure all the vistas were right in 2019. Big snow year. This is me in August 2019 up on Silver Pass with crampons and a whippet. I prefer an ice axe, but a whippet is also very useful. And, for light snow, I think a whippet is just fine. But, be aware. If you're doing this in a big snow year, you need to be prepared for this kind of condition. This can happen. And in 2019, I got as far as Bear Creek, and then my boots completely delaminated. They had been in snow and water because there's a lot of water too down below for essentially the whole hike. And the soles just fell off, both boots. And that ended my hike. I didn't have another pair of boots and shoe goo, nothing really worked. And I honestly had been sick of trudging through snow, snow cups and all these things. It's pretty brutal going through snow in the late season when it's soft. Early season, like the PCTers in May, that's a different game. Then it's hard and consolidated. It's not as hard to walk on typically. Sometimes you break through, but the difference is you got to wake up at 3, 4 in the morning, summit your peaks, slide down with the sun, and you're carrying a ton of food because all the resupply places are closed. So winter, early winters is a whole different game. I came back again in 2021 and through hiked it south to north or northbound with my son. And this was the trip I made where I checked all the scenes in the book, made sure they were accurate, and got a northbound perspective on the trail. And every one of those passes and so forth was different going northbound. So let's talk a little trail history. There's a ton of it in my book. I don't want to dive into it too much. But the trail, of course, was named for John Muir. And many people are mistaken in their belief that John Muir first hiked this trail. He did not. He may have hiked parts of it, but no one really knows. Muir didn't keep a very accurate log of where he went. We do know he hiked certain peaks. He hiked Mount Whitney. He was one of the first few people to go up Whitney. And he certainly explored various parts of it, although he didn't explore Evolution Valley, apparently. But what happened was Muir died in 1914. The Sierra Club was in the process of trying to do what they called the high mountain route, a trail across the Sierra north to south. And they needed funds. And William Colby of the Sierra Club met with an assistant to the California governor who suggested that if instead of calling it the High Mountain Route, they called it the John Muir Trail in honor of John Muir, it would be much easier to raise money. And so they named it the John Muir Trail in honor of Muir. So, the name comes from Muir, but Muir did not personally hike the trail as it is now, although he may have hiked parts of it. Some of the important players in the exploration of the Sierra, folks like this is the Whitney expedition, of which the main people here probably would be Brewer, King, and some of the assistants here. But I'm not going to dive too much into the history. We can do that later. That's another talk. Theodore Solomons, as legend goes, when he was 14 in 1884, envisioned the high mountain route running across the Sierra. When he was 22, he was, he joined the Sierra Club as a young man. He was a charter member, and he proposed this and set out on 3 major expeditions, not so successful. He wasn't the greatest navigator, but 3 separate expeditions to find a route for the trail. And he explored most of what became the northern end. Now, when we talk about finding a trail, we tend to think, oh, these guys found the trail. Well, no, they didn't. There were plenty of trails in existence. Here's an animal trail. This is a deer path. And these existed long before people were here. Animals make trails to water and other important places, salt licks and so forth. And of course, the Native Americans followed them and hunted them. And when the Native Americans followed them, it widened the trail. So our first real trails were animal trails that were expanded by the Native Americans. And when Westerners moved west with expansion, they brought sheep. And the sheep herders followed the Native American trails and expanded them further. So here's sheep crossing the San Joaquin River on a bridge at Simpson Meadow. So these trails existed before Solomons and the other people and Muir and so forth went into the Sierra. They were following existing sheep routes. And in fact, if you read, I keep pitching my book, but if you read the book, you find out that Solomons got a lot of help from the sheep herders. He was put back on the correct route. In one case, he was fed when he was starving. So the sheep herders were very much out there. These explorers were not discovering very often new trail. Another important explorer for the JMT was Bolton Brown, an artist working at Stanford who spent his summers in the Sierra and was just smitten with it. He went up there with his wife, did some beautiful drawings, and continued to explore the Sierra until he was fired. He was fired from Stanford by Mrs. Stanford, who caught him using live nude models in his class. And that was a big no-no in those days. So he went on to found the artist schools in Woodstock, actually. So, he's got quite the history too. And J.N. LeConte on the left here, um, rather short. He was an amazing young man. He's the son of Joseph LeConte, the one who there's so much controversy now over naming and the UC. J.N. LeConte wasn't really a part of that controversy, but he became, at I think the age of 22, a full professor of mechanical engineering at Berkeley, and in his summers went out and mapped the Sierra. And LeConte eventually, when Muir died, became president of the Sierra Club. So he was the second president, and then I think Colby was the third. So LeConte published these fantastically detailed, carefully measured maps of the Sierra and did many, many first ascents where he would climb mountains and triangulate and find paths. So LeConte was, in many senses, a true explorer. William Colby was instrumental in getting the funds, as I said, for these trails. He used to organize these high Sierra trips where he'd bring hundreds of people in those days, not very environmental, into the Sierra. He was also instrumental in getting the funds for constructing the Muir hut. So another fun story. And of course, these guys didn't do it all on their own. Many, many workers over many years, many Forest Service people worked together to build the trail. This is also Forester Pass. This is a view of exactly where those PCT hikers were crossing in the snow. So, a little background on the Muir Trail. I don't want to dive much more than that. What I want to switch now is to a lot of practical considerations. First, how do you succeed? And what I did was I looked at surveys of the JMT where there are these wonderful surveys, and you all should take one when you finish your hike. Whether you're successful or not, you should still fill out the surveys because the data is quite useful. And I took a number of these surveys from over the years, some of them from a wonderful gentleman named John Ladd, who had been collecting them. He started the original surveys. And I looked at why people quit. And it turns out about 50% of all people who hike the JMT quit. About half the people don't make the hike. And I want to look at what we can learn from this and the statistics, because if you know why people quit, you can do something a little different and succeed. So we're going to turn a negative into a positive. So if I were doing this live, I would ask you what you think the top reasons are, and it might be fun. In the chat, why don't you take a minute and just type in what you think the number one reason people quit is. Go ahead, read a few, read a few.
Okay, yeah. So let's see. There's a lot of, and I'll just summarize. So there's a lot of injury, there's anxiety, too much weight, lonely, lack of resupply, mental exhaustion, ill-prepared, weather complications, blisters. But I'd say most people are saying injury at this point.
Okay, and that's wrong. That is not the number one reason people fail, but that is up there. Injury is about 10% of the people who quit. But it's interesting. And it's interesting when you ask people what they think, that comes up quite a bit. In fact, Carol thought that was the number one reason when she and I were chatting. So number 14, if we're going to do this backwards, the bugs and the beasts. Less than 0.1% quit because of bugs and beasts. It's interesting because when you read the JMT site, and I'm often on it, the number one thing, the number one anxiety, I think, is bears. People are really worried about the bears when they're going out there, and understandably, because if you've never been in the Sierra, you've never hiked in the presence of bears, I can understand the fear. I certainly worried about bears when I was a young 20-something hiker going into the Sierra. But it turns out the bears are big chickens. Black bears. I'm not talking about grizzly. We're not talking about polar. We're talking about the Sierra black bear. A little bit of banging your stakes together, banging some pots and pans, and yelling at them will chase them off. Most of the time, if the bears see you, you won't see them. They're just going to run off. I've seen a lot of bear, but I've only had one standoff in 30 years, and the bear backed down. Very, very rare. Very rare. So the bugs and the bees, not to be worried about. Incidentally, you're not allowed to bring bear repellent. Please don't. It's not legal, and you don't need it. All you need is a qualified bear can. Bears see the bear can and they know what it is. They're very smart, and they just leave it. They know it's not worth messing with. And never, ever bring food into your tent, not in the Sierra. You hear people talk about this, that will get you in a lot of trouble. But the bears, big chickens, if you see them, bang on some pots and pans, they'll run away. You're most likely to see bears if you stop, say, at Red's Meadow at a car camping spot where they know they can get stuff from unwary people. And the bugs. The bugs are an annoyance. They're a big problem for a few weeks, but they're not so bad. You definitely want a head net. Absolutely bring a head net. All year long, there are spots that'll have bugs, like Tully Hole, famous for bugs, right? But most of the trail is pretty bug free. You're pretty high up there, a little breeze, and the bugs go away. There will be 2 weeks when the snow melts where the bugs are horrendous, and I'd say that's probably now. I would guess that for the first 2 weeks of June, it will be a bug fest in the Sierra, and by July, it'll be fine. Now, different people have different definitions of fine, but I think for most people, the bugs will not be anywhere near as big an issue. Number 13, navigation, getting lost, less than 1%. It's really hard to get lost on the JMT. You got a bunch of people going with you. The trail is well marked. It's well signed. Most of it goes through national park, so it's well maintained. Really hard to get lost. That said, I did meet a young woman who was lost up near Silver Pass in 2021. I was going off trail I was going down the Lake of the Lone Indian, and I ran into a young lady in tears, and I was really worried. I'm like, what happened? Are you okay? And she's like, I dropped my cell phone. It broke. I don't know where I am. And she was crying, and she was literally lost because all her navigation system was on her cell phone. And she had been following these lines on the app and had no clue where she was. And so there's a lesson there. If you're going to rely on a cell phone, that's okay, but batteries die, cell phones break, and you should know where you are. You should have paper maps. I always carry a paper map. I always know my exits. This is another thing. I met a gentleman down at the Woods Creek Bridge who was injured. He wasn't feeling very well, and he was hiking out, and he was headed to Sawmill Pass. And I was shocked because Sawmill Pass is a brutal pass. It drops you down in the desert, and it's sketchy. It's not well maintained. And I said, why? Who recommended you go to Sawmill Pass? And he's like, well, on the app, there are a couple of reviews, and they say it's a pretty easy pass. And This is another problem with the app. When you go with crowdsourcing, who's sourcing it? This may be an outstanding PCT hiker who knows route navigation and thought it was no big deal. But that doesn't mean you're going to think that. This guy could have been in serious trouble. There's no water down there. So I redirected him to Road's End, where there's lots of people and you can hitch a lift and, there are rangers and so forth. And he later emailed me. He was very grateful. And if he had gone out Sawmill, I don't know what would have happened. Solo and injured, not a good mix. So know your exits, because there are definitely sketchy exits on the JMT and there are definitely good ones. And have a paper map, know where you are, and know how to find your way on a map in case something happens to your phone, right? Don't be that person I had to guide back to the trail. You want to have a sense of navigation. Number 12, 2%. This hits a lot more people. Smoke and wildfires. I've had to get off other trails because of smoke. It's really unbearable. It's not healthy. And we get wildfires in the summer. This is the downside of hiking later in the year. Typically, fire season is August. Typically, it's late August. And so if you go on the JMT in late August, there is a chance there'll be a fire or smoke that affects your hike. And it's so frustrating when you've planned a through hike and you're out there and you can't breathe and you've got to get off trail, but safety first, right? So wildfire can happen, be aware of it. And I strongly recommend you bring like a Garmin InReach or some device, because you won't have cell phone reception. Some of the iPhones now use satellite, but I like the InReach. It's a little more reliable. Um, but have someone you can get in touch with who particularly can tell you, hey, there's a fire coming up north of you. Be aware of that. And you'll know the conditions and you'll know what's going on. There is a trail network, people talk to each other on trail. So you will get kind of word of mouth as you're going. But it's helpful to have somebody on the outside you can communicate with about trail conditions. So be aware of that. Gear failure, number 11. This happened to me with my boots. They delaminated. Where do you get a new pair of boots when you're on trail, right? Can be an issue. So, I mean, if you've got someone at home who can express mail you something, well, great, but not so easy to get it to the JMT. JMT only touches a road at Red's Meadow. Rest of it's pure wilderness. So where do you get new gear? I mean, there are places, but it's a challenge. So with gear, this can happen, and you want to test your gear. What I recommend is a couple of shakedown hikes where you know your equipment, you know what's going on, and you've got some plans of how to fix things. For example, I carry a needle and thread. I've torn the seat of my pants more times than I want to say, and it's not a pretty stitch, but I've had to stitch up my pants quite a few times. I carry duct tape on my trekking poles. When I had my boots delaminate, I duct taped them. They didn't get me that far, but they got me out. And I've saved my buns in snow and in the winter actually with duct tape and some ski boots that delaminated on me in the backcountry. So duct tape wrapped around the trekking poles, wonderful. Can patch up stuff. You can use it on blisters and wounds if you've got nothing else. You may be able to fix a broken backpack with duct tape. So in the backcountry, having a little bit of repair stuff, some tenacious tape for your tent if you punch a hole, things like that, highly recommended. And a first aid kit. Some people try to save weight by not bringing a first aid kit. That's ridiculous. Because if you get injured, well, you better have a way to fix yourself. But that you obviously don't save weight in those ways. So gear failure does happen. The better prepared you are for it, the better, but sometimes it's just what it is. Number 10, sleep-related issues. It might be the bears, like in this cartoon, but for most people, sleep issues fall into two categories. Either altitude, it's difficult to sleep at altitude. Your body has this little CO2 alarm where if the CO2 level gets too high, it wakes you up. Kind of annoying, but it does that. And so you may have trouble sleeping at altitude. Some solutions to that: Advil or ibuprofen actually help with sleeping at altitude. They actually help you acclimate. That's an over the counter remedy if you can take it. Um, Diamox is a prescription drug for altitude acclimation. Diamox has a lot of side effects. You're probably better to try it before your hike to make sure they don't bother you. And there's a lot of research that shows you can take a low dose of Diamox just before sleeping. I forget what the numbers are, but there's a website out there, a Facebook group for altitude acclimation. That'll probably be our first link, Carol, if you know it. Um, but on the JMT, there's often on the JMT Facebook group, there's often a cross link to it. It's a very helpful book, a group if you suffer from altitude issues. And they talk about Diamox and how if you take a low dose just before sleeping, you can acclimate with fewer of the side effects. For me, the side effects are awful. I get tingly. It makes me pee all the time, so I'm getting up to pee. I don't like Diamox, but for some people, it's a miracle drug. My solution for sleep-related issues in altitude: sleep low. I make it a point not to sleep above 10,000 feet. So go back to that sawtooth graph that I showed you and plot where roughly you want to camp so you're a bit lower if altitude is a big issue. Other things that can affect your sleep: a bad choice of sleeping pads, right? If I've met people who now didn't even bring a sleeping pad and they were miserable because it's cold. So you want a good sleeping pad, something that you're comfortable on. And this you can only find out by trying. I cannot tell you what sleeping pad you will sleep best on. I sleep well on Thermarest, the little thin pro lights. I like to be low to the ground. Some people like these 3-inch things. I just, it depends on you. But I strongly recommend going down REI or wherever, trying these out, and take them home and sleep on them before you're on trail and see if they're comfortable. Noises can keep you up, all kinds of things. You may want earplugs, you may want a face mask. But obviously, if you're not sleeping, you're going to be miserable on trail. So, sleep related issues, another thing. Now, some of you said this in the chat. Number 9, loneliness. I've suffered from this. I've missed my wife. Um, I've missed my family. Sometimes that's just unbearable. And you're like, I don't want to be out here anymore. This really does affect people. I think on the JMT, less than some other hikes, because, like on the PCT, you're out for 5 months or 4 or 5 months. That's a long time. The JMT is not quite that long, but for some people, this is huge. So be aware this can affect you. And the inevitable number 8, work and family issues. Here's the downside of bringing that Garmin, right? If you've got the Garmin and you can communicate with your family or your boss, your workplace, well, they can communicate with you. Gee, Fred, we need you to come in and cover someone's shift. You're off on the JMT, right? Horrible. So sometimes I limit the communication, but, be aware sometimes trips get interrupted. That's just life. Nothing we can do about this, really. Number 7, getting close to number 1 now, illness, not including altitude. I got sick on my PCT hike. You can still hear it in my voice. Probably uncontaminated, unfiltered water that I drank at a fire station. And I think I got something in my throat. I don't know for sure. But on trail, you can get sick. There are very many things that can get you sick on trail. Number 1, probably bad hygiene. Norovirus runs rampant among hiking communities, right? It's spread I hate to talk about it, but it's spread through fecal contamination. Basically, you're in the woods doing your business. You don't necessarily have a sink to wash up on. And then you go and share some trail food or shake hands with somebody and you pass it on. Apparently, you can't get it back from yourself, but you can give it to others. And then it spreads. Dirty water. You'll want to filter your water on trail and make sure you're not going to get Giardia, for example, and get sick because of the water and things like that. So illness can be an issue. Um, Maybe you go into town and pick something up, right? Sometimes it's inevitable, but you want to minimize your chance. Good hygiene is important. I carry little tiny bars of soap, and I don't, this is a questionable issue because you don't want to get soap or anything else in the watershed. So I'll go back to camp, get a little water, and wash my hands away from any potential contaminating areas. Some people carry hand sanitizer, but you want to do something so that you're maintaining as sanitary a condition as you can on trail. I also do something interesting. We'll get into this in gear, but I carry a little bidet with me. It's just a little squirt attachment that I can put in my water bottle and wash my buns after doing my business. And I don't need to put toilet paper in the wilderness. Toilet paper has become a huge issue. They now ask you to pack out your dirty toilet paper. But I wish people wouldn't bring it. I think it'd be so much nicer if everybody used a bidet. It's extremely clean. You don't have to touch anything. And you dry off quickly. So I recommend the backcountry bidet. You can find them on Amazon. There are a bunch of them. And I'll show you one when we go through the gear. But you want to practice with it. Some people will bring an extra bottle. If your technique is not good, obviously putting it in your water bottle may not be the best choice. But if you get good at this, and I've been doing it for years, it's fine because the water flows in one direction. So illness, you want to be careful about hygiene on trail. Number 6, food-related issues. This is almost always, I didn't bring enough food. You need 4,000 to 6,000, it's estimated, calories per day when through hiking, particularly if you're making big miles. That's about twice your normal calorie consumption. But then you've got to get it all in this bear can. It's a challenge, and we'll talk more about food later. But you want to bring enough food and enough calories that you're happy on trail. I can't tell you what you're going to eat or what you're going to crave. All I can say is do a bunch of shakedown hikes, put in as many miles as you can on them, hike over a 3,000-foot pass, and see what you end up eating so that you know, hey, what are you going to be eating day by day on trail? Because if you run out of food, your hike's over, right? I mean, you can beg food from people. There are hiker boxes. I've seen people get by without food, but it's hit or miss. You may not get what you need, or if you're on a special diet, what you really need. It's an issue. And then these prepackaged meals, they really vary. And when I took my son on the JMT, he bought a bunch of meals that he thought he was going to love, got out on trail and couldn't stand any of them. They weren't at all what he imagined them to be. And he hates cheese, and half of them had cheese in them. So I don't get how he hates cheese, but he does. I love cheese. But, these are the things. Test your meals, taste them. When Joey and I did this first trail, we had bars that we bought in Ralph's, I think, and we hated our bars. We never tried them. We just brought them on trail. And we were sitting there eating these things and complaining about our bars. They were awful, but it's all we had to eat. This happens. A lot of, in my book, Gil's struggles with food are based on my early experiences. And the food used to be, I mean, going back to the 70s and 80s, The prepackaged meals were horrible. Now you can get organic, you can get really wonderful meals. You can also make your own and you can dehydrate them. Inga has a wonderful book. I think you all know Inga from the JMT sites, The Hungry Spork, where she talks about how to make your own meals. There's another good book, A Fork in the Trail, that has a bunch of recipes for dehydrating. So between Inga's book, The Hungry Spork, and I think it's Linda Marsh's book, A Fork in the Trail, some good references if you're going to make your own meals. Downside to making your own meals, you've got to prep them. So you're going to need to soak them. You're going to need to cook them. It takes more fuel and there's more cleanup. Whereas these boil and bag meals, you just heat some water and pour them in the bag. So with homemade meals, and I've done both, you have the wonder of great food. You know your ingredients, you know what you've got, it tastes wonderful, you're guaranteed. On the flip side, with these boil and bag meals, they're prep in about 5 minutes, cleanup is easy, and you don't use a lot of fuel. So it kind of depends. It depends on, many factors, but you want enough food and you want food that you like. All right, number 5, blisters. I've seen so many blisters out there on trail, and blisters will end your hike fast. It's misery. They can get infected. You can get sepsis. Um, why do people get blisters? Number one reason, they didn't try their footwear, right? They bought a new pair of boots that everybody recommended. JMT is the first place I'm going to try these. Huge mistake. Whatever boots you get, put 50 miles on them, take them around your local park, wear them on some trail, get some mileage, make sure they fit. If they don't fit, change them. Don't go, well, I'll just use, don't. This will end your hike in a hurry. Um, Clean socks, another big thing. I always carry an extra pair of socks, and I wear double socks. I wear a liner sock inside a hiking sock. Really helps with blisters, in my opinion, but it's hotter. Many things you can do, but the number one thing, know your footwear. Make sure your footwear is comfortable. Everybody I saw with blisters was like, well, they're new boots or they're new shoes, or everybody said these were good. That's where you get in trouble. Another place you get in trouble, your feet swell. They grow. They grow about a half a size on average for people on trail. So again, hiking in your boots before the trail, you'll know, hey, are these a little too small, right? Because your feet do swell. All right, number 4, altitude sickness. We covered this already, but this is a reality. It is a biggie, particularly if you're going northbound, if you're starting right at Whitney. How can you prepare for altitude sickness? Well, I mentioned a few. Advil helps, or ibuprofen, um, Diamox, but also just basic acclimation. If you spend a few days at altitude before your hike, this will work wonders. Where can you do that? Tuolumne Meadows, nice 9,000 feet. Mammoth Mountain, nice place to stay, also about 9,000. If you're going northbound, Horseshoe Meadow, just before Cottonwood Pass, up at 10,000. You can camp there a few days and acclimate. 3, 4 days of acclimation works wonders. Or if you're going southbound, acclimate slowly as you go. Know the signs of altitude sickness. They're not as obvious as you think. Feeling tired, irritable. Irritable is a huge one. Headache, low energy, not feeling hungry, not feeling thirsty. Big signs of altitude sickness. So if somebody in your group or a friend has a headache or is just like, I'm not hungry, I'm not thirsty, I'll catch up to you. Be aware, watch them. If they sit down, they're like, I just need a little nap. That's a huge sign. Don't let somebody who's getting altitude sickness take a nap. That can go into edemas. It can be a life-threatening issue. So watch them. The only cure for altitude sickness when it's happening, get lower, go down, hike down. Even if it costs you a day or two, get down and get hydrated and see what happens. And don't be afraid to call for a chopper if you're having serious symptoms. One of the biggest rescue things in the Sierra is people with edema, with altitude sickness. Although the number one issue is broken bones. And that typically happens at river crossings, people walking logs and falling off. So just be aware. These are all things that are preventable. And that's the important point. You can take steps like acclimation to prevent the chances of this happening to you. Number three, we can't prevent this one, weather. 9% lost their hike because of weather. In some cases, ran out of time or whatever. But weather is a big issue. You will encounter storms in the Sierra, random storms, possibly snow. I showed you I hit snow in August in a year like this. High rivers, high heat is another one. Sometimes it's just really, really hot. So, what can we do about weather? Well, one thing is have a couple of extra days in your itinerary because you may get 2, 3 days of rain. I had one trip on the TST where I was stuck in my tent for 3 days in pouring rain. It can happen. What else can we do about weather? Well, there are guidelines for lightning, and I want to share these. Some of these are inappropriate for the Sierra. But, if you're caught outside with no shelter nearby, get off elevated areas, well, you may not be able to. So in that case, you want to crouch down in a ball-like position with your head tucked over your ears, making minimal contact, and just wait and get your pack off. Your pack may be a lightning rod, and stay away from lone trees. There was a gentleman killed on the JMT, or was it a woman, about 2 years ago, who was under a tree and got struck by lightning in a storm. Very unfortunate. But this typical advice: stay out of cliffs and overhangs and so forth, and stay away from water. But know what to do in a lightning storm, and ideally get low and get it so that you're not the highest point. Sometimes that's difficult. I've been in lightning more times than I want to tell you. Rivers, when it rains, or if you're in the early season, rivers can be a big issue. You're going to have to cross Bear Creek. There is no bridge at Bear Creek. It's a serious crossing. And the South Fork of the Kings. The South Fork of the Kings, people have died there, unfortunately. And it's really unfortunate because you don't have to cross there. You can go north back towards Mather Pass, and you can go around. There's a route around the crossing of the Kings. For Bear, for the Bear, what is it? Bear Creek, you can take a cross-country route to avoid that. So in heavy water, yes, with a good map and a little navigation skill, there are ways to avoid crossings. You can also go up and down looking for large trees and things like that to cross. But if you do have to ford a creek, there are some things you should know. And for this, I'm going to refer you mostly to Ned Tibbett's excellent talks. And Carol, I'd like you to link up his safety talks, particularly to the PCTers, because he gets into this and snow navigation and all that much more than I do. And he's much more qualified to talk about it. Wonderful guy. But in general, if you're crossing a river, you don't want the water to be higher than thigh deep. If it's getting up to your waist, it's going to be way too powerful for you to cross, particularly if you're doing it alone. The force just grows as the water gets deeper. And you want to do it, if you're going to do it at all, with other folks. And you can see some of these techniques for linking up, using a branch for linking up. But I want you also to note where the water's flowing. Look at this arrow. They are not walking in this direction sideways across the creek, because that would get the maximum cross section of people in the force of the current. Rather, they're keeping their thin side to the flow as they cross. And this is critical because that presents a much smaller surface area for the water to push on. So knowing how to cross a creek in heavy water conditions, doing it properly, this is important. And if you're going in early, if I'd say if you're going in before July 15th, watch net this year, but it depends on the year. In 2019, I'd say anytime in the entire year. Um, Watch some of Ned's videos. He gets into this in great detail, and he's wonderful. So I'll pass the buck to Ned on this one. Snow navigation, same issue. If you're going in the early season, there will be no trail. And you shouldn't follow the trail anyway. It may not be the best route in the snow. You better know how to navigate snow. Your GPS is not enough. You should have done snow travel, snow navigation. You should know how to use an ice axe and crampons. You should know what you're up to and have trained for this. Do not just go in with the proper gear and no training. An ice axe and crampons will not save your life if you don't know how to use them. And I'm not going to teach these skills here. This is far more than I can do. This is something you need to take a class on. But, just a little bit of ice, microspikes are probably fine. Most people can figure that out. But when you get into heavy snow and snow navigation, it's beyond the level of this talk. You need to take a class. You need to learn these skills. You need the proper equipment, or you really have no business being out there because you're either going to become a search and rescue victim or a statistic. And I don't want to see that happen to anyone. Snow travel is serious business. It's fun. I love backcountry skiing. I love being in the snow in the backcountry, but it's something you want people to teach you and to do safely. So I just mentioned that these are all part of weather-related issues. Heat, another big deal. There's not much you can do about heat other than start early, take a break, take a siesta in the afternoon, bring an umbrella. There are these reflective umbrellas, but I don't think the reflective umbrellas are so useful in the Sierra because of wind and trees and other issues. But if you're doing desert hiking, maybe. But heat can be an issue too on the JMT. So it's interesting. Okay, now we get to number two. Number two is what everybody said, physical injury. 10% of the people who get off trail, it's physical injury. It's not number one. How do people get injured on the JMT? Two, maybe three major ways. Number one, the number one injury, river crossing on logs. People want to be macho and walk across. You meet me in the wilderness and there's a log crossing like this, high above a river with rocks. You will see me sitting on my ass. I will scrunch across that log. I've seen too many people slip off. And I'm terrified of falling off a log. A broken hip will not only end my trip, it'll probably end my hiking career. So I wouldn't do it. Don't be macho. I mean, if you know yourself, if you're, a slackline walker and you can do this stuff, go for it. But, just be careful. And also be aware your center of balance is higher because you got a pack on. So river crossings, number one place there are injuries. That's the number one injury rangers talk about evacuating people because of is slipping off of logs. Um, Other injuries, we saw blisters. That's a big injury. Twisted ankles, twisted feet. I really recommend trekking poles for the JMT. A lot of down stepping on those passes. And the other big injury is just overuse injury. You're hiking 10, 12 miles a day, day after day, 20, 30 days, whatever you're out there for. That's a lot of miles to put on the body. So people strain things. People injure themselves just by pushing, pushing, pushing. So that's also an issue. And again, know your exits. do have a good first aid kit. So what's number one? Carol, did anybody say what number one was?
No, I don't think so unless I missed something, but I didn't see it.
44.1% of the people who got off trail, this was the reason. And it's the absolute most controllable reason there is: unable to make daily miles. This is sad, but this is the big one. Here's the problem. People want to do the JMT in their 2-week vacation. So they're like, okay, we'll do 15 miles a day. Well, maybe 15 miles a day is not a big deal. Maybe you're a trail runner. Maybe you've hiked 15 miles once in the past over little mountains, and you're like, yeah, I'll do that again and again. We'll get in shape on trail. But remember, you're going to be doing this for 15, 20 days in a row. 15 miles a day over those passes I showed you, it's just going to burn you out. And I've compiled this because this 44% includes my partner couldn't make the miles. Even if you can, if you're hiking with somebody else who can't, that's going to end your trip or maybe end your relationship, right? Or your friendship. I've seen arguments on trail over miles where one guy will come in, he's like, I'm having a great time, and his partner will walk in and you can just see it on his face. His partner's furious. Why didn't you wait for me? Are you serious? We're going to do another 15 tomorrow. What are you thinking? And that conflict over, I didn't have enough time. So unable to make the daily miles. And even if you're a trail runner and you're able to do it and you know your pace and everything's perfect, how can you control the weather? You get 3 stormy days, that ends 3 days of your plan. What do you do now? Right? You run out of food, you can't make your miles. So, how do you avoid this? You plan extra days. I always put 2 0 days into a long hike. Those 2 0 days I may never use. A 0 day is a day I don't plan to hike. But those 0 days give me flexibility. If I get to a lake that's drop dead gorgeous and I want to stop there, I can. If I meet somebody interesting, I can hang out with them. If I get to VVR and there's a party going and everybody's really interesting, I can stay an extra day. And if I finish early, I finish early, right? I'd prefer to be in the woods than back in a hotel, but it's up to you. Having 2 0 days may save your buns on the JMT. It's really critical. And planning less miles or knowing what your reasonable mileage is. So, how many days should you be planning? Right? My trip, I took 28 days, averaging only 8 miles a day, averaging 1,600 feet a day. But in reality, some of those days were 3,000, some were one. Nothing's averaging 7 days of food. But again, I carried 12 later. So these are just averages. Don't use these for planning. Look at a map and do actual planning. The average JMT hiker, and remember, there are a lot of 20 something average hikers, or a lot of 20, 30 something trail runners out there. The average JMT hiker does it in 20 days. That's 11 miles a day. And 20 days, let me tell you, 20 days is an intense schedule. So if you have done 10, 20, 10, 12 miles a day in the Sierra before, carrying a full pack with 7 days of food in it, and you know what that's like, and then you think about, can I do that day after day after day for 20 days in a row? Okay, 20 days is a good plan. And I'd still throw in 2 more as 0 days, just in case of rain or, twisting a leg or whatever. I'd rather take 25, right? A little bit easier. And as I said, I took 28. So if you're trying to push it in 15 days or 12 days, yes, if you're a trail runner, yes, if you've done this kind of thing, yes, if you're in fantastic shape. But the average person is going to need 20, maybe 25 days to do the JMT. And having a couple of zeros makes a huge difference. So some of you may already have gotten your permits, and now you're thinking, okay, what do I do? I want to add 2 0 days. And let me assure you, assuming you can fit that into your vacation time, and that there's nothing I can do about that for you. But assuming you can, it's perfectly legitimate, at least as far as I know from the regulations, but you're going to want to check them because they do always change. But as far as I know, it's perfectly legitimate to add a day or two to an existing permit. You cannot change the start date on a permit, but you can change the end date typically. Again, you'll want to check that. I know on rec.gov you can go in and add a few days without any consequence on most permits. The way I would do it is when you go to pick up your permit from the ranger station, just ask, can we add 2 or 3 days to the back end of the permit? Or what happens if, there's a storm and we're stuck out for an extra day or two? I think most of the time the rangers will just add a couple of days to the back end. Again, I don't want to cause anyone to lose a permit. Check the rules specifically for the JMT. They often change, but it's my understanding that you can add to the exit date, to the length of a permit. That's permissible, but you cannot, absolutely cannot change the start date. So I hope that helps people who may want to have an extra day or two just in case of weather and miles and other contingencies. Again, number one reason people did not succeed at the JMT, completely in your control. Having a few extra days in your plan for contingency. That's the number one reason. And it's surprising to people. All right, practical stuff. Possible resupplies. There are others, but these are the main ones. Tuolumne Meadows, mile 23. You are allowed to stick resupplies in the bear boxes at Tuolumne. Find a remote one, label it well. I have had one resupply stolen from me out of a bear box. I was very upset, but generally, people will leave them alone. Reds Meadow Resort may or may not be open. I hear they're doing repairs on the road, but it's a place you can mail yourself food and they have a store there. You can also get into Mammoth over Mammoth Pass here and resupply there. VVR or Vermilion Valley, I really recommend a stop here. Beautiful place, wonderful people, very friendly, but it's a little bit of a party atmosphere. So if you're seeking a true wilderness experience, maybe this isn't for you. But I love the food and the people. Muir Trail Ranch, much more sedate, more expensive. Oh, is it 95 now? But right on trail, very convenient. Bishop Pass, not a convenient pass to hike over. It's about a 2 day hike, maybe one over a very high pass. But you could get stuff horsed in or muled in over Bishop Pass. It's not a popular resupply. Most people resupply over Kearsarge. Rhodes End is another option, but notice it's 16 miles off trail. And then you've got a hitch to the nearest store. There's no facilities at Rhodes End. Kearsarge Pass, very nice. You go over Kearsarge Pass, come into Onion Valley, and in fact, the wonderful folks at the Mount Williamson Motel will come and pick you up, take you to their motel, feed you a fantastic breakfast, and bring you back in the morning. And they can hold a resupply. So if you're going over Kearsarge Pass, shout out to Mount Williamson. It's run by a former JMT hiker. So Kearsarge Pass and other methods, pack mules and all these other things. And again, here's my compiled statistics on quitting, right? Why did people get off trail? They total 100 and notice unable to make the miles. That's the big one. That's the one you really want to think about when planning. Okay. Another transition. Leave no trace. I wouldn't be doing justice to a talk on the JMT if I didn't talk about this. These are called LNT principles. Know the rules. Travel only on the trail. Don't walk through meadows and tramp the poor grass and all this. Dispose your waste properly. Please use a bidet, carry out your toilet paper. I hate when I'm walking the trail and I see somebody's just dried themselves and tossed a piece by the trail. Everybody will have to look at your dirty paper. Please don't do that. Leave what you find, right? Take only pictures. Um, don't make campfires. That's just a huge risk out there. You're only allowed to make them in established sites in certain places. Most through hikers will not make fires. And if you do, and it is in a legal fire pit, put it out completely with water and make sure it's out. But, the Sierra's got such a high fire risk. I would say, please don't make a fire. Um, Respect wildlife. Yeah, be aware of that. Bring the proper bear can and be considerate of other visitors. This includes things like not blasting music on a Bluetooth speaker. No one wants to hear that. Being quiet, not setting your tent up next to other people without asking, not setting your tent up in the middle of a meadow, just, or next to water. The Rangers will go over these, but I do want to mention them. Okay, so we're going to transition into what to pack. And before I get into gear, I want to come back to food because I'm not going to be able to show you food. And I'm not going to tell you that my food is what you should bring. But what do I eat on trail? And I've been months on trail. This is what I eat. It's not exciting. I do have some variety, but not much. For breakfast, I have a Starbucks coffee mixed with all natural cocoa for sugar and caffeine and oatmeal. I hate oatmeal. I can't tell you how much I'm sick of oatmeal, but it's the lightest, best energy food I've found, and I like a warm breakfast. So I'll have a hot breakfast on trail. I'm not saying you should eat this. You should eat whatever makes you happy. I'm just giving you an example. For lunch, it's all bars. And I have spent weeks purchasing bars at my local co-op, tasting them, rating them on a spreadsheet, and figuring out what bars I like. And I like Epic bars. I like Pro bars because they're very energy dense. I like Kind bars for the nuts and Laura bars. That's me. It doesn't mean you're going to like those bars, but this variety of these bars is what I eat. I have some Noon with me, electrolyte. I talked about heat. You lose a lot of electrolytes, a lot of salt through sweating. Uh, Through hiking is no place to go on a low salt diet. You're going to lose salt through your sweat. You're going to need, I can't say need, but most people are going to need some electrolytes. If it gets hot, I put a Noon a day into my water. Um, but whatever you need, some people will mix salt and other things to do this, but I bring electrolytes. For dinner, I will start with instant miso soup, which is very light powder, and some tea. No caffeine because I want to sleep by 9 o'clock, hiker midnight, and I will bring a packaged meal. Shepherd pie is an example of a 550 calorie meal, very calorie dense, with all natural ingredients, and I find very tasty. I prefer it to, say, the Mountain House meals, which I find a little more synthetic, but they're cheaper, and I do eat Mountain House too. Again, try the food. When I do my daily food analysis, I've gone through all the calories. I'm low. I'm at 1662. As I said, most people will need about 3,000 to 4,000 calories a day, maybe more. I have a reserve. I have a rather heavy front pack, I call it. Well, my stomach down here. So I have a reserve that I can lean on, and I regularly lose 20 pounds hiking the JMT. So I'm tapping into my reserve. This may not be enough calories for some of you. How can you up them? Well, bring another crowbar, another 300 calories there. Eat two dinners if you need to. You can add supplement like peanuts, very high in calories, peanut butter, extremely high, olive oil. One of the most calorie dense things you can drink is olive oil. People will add olive oil to their dinner to up their calories on trail. So just be aware of this, but also be aware of the mass. Notice that my food weighs just over a pound a day. And that's critical. And also getting it all in the bear can. My food fits tightly in a bear can. And sometimes you want to deflate your food pack or so forth to get it in there. So I'm not saying you should eat what I'm eating here. I don't think this is the healthiest thing anyway. But you definitely want to work out your food before you do a through hike. You want to test it and taste it, go through an analysis, and make sure it's enough for you so you don't run out of food and end up eating your partner's food or just being hungry and unhappy the whole trip. Although, like me, if through hiking is also a method of losing weight, well, you may be okay. What is the best resource outside of this video if you're planning to hike the John Muir Trail? In my opinion, it's Elizabeth Wank's book, John Muir Trail. Elizabeth Wank, by disclaimer, is a friend. I know her. She's an amazing hiker. She regularly puts out 30-mile days in the Sierra. And she has hiked the Muir Trail numerous times, goes every year or two on the trail. You may meet her out there this year, never know. And she checks the campsites and all that. Far, far better than Far Out or some of the online guides, because what Lizzie will tell you in her book is what campsites are really good, comparing them all. What somebody on Far Out or an app is going to tell you is what they thought was the best campsite, but they obviously haven't seen them all, and their view may be biased by certain things. So I think it's very nice to have a guide like this and a paper map with you. Um, and of course, you want to read this book, right? Teasing. No, Lizzie Wank's book, probably the best book for the Muir Trail. Here is a list of items in my pack. And as I said, we're going to go through all the different items that I carry. But I want to bring your attention to this particular website, lighterpack.com. I find it extremely helpful. And I know you can't read this slide in PowerPoint, but I find it extremely helpful because you can input each of the items in your pack, put in the exact weight. I usually get a postage scale and weigh each of the items. And then you can see exactly what your pack weighs and what are the items that are the heaviest. And going through this, I know it sounds kind of silly, but going through this is actually the first step to figuring out what are the items that you can change or eliminate in order to save weight. And this is really critical. The other thing I like so much about lighterpack.com, other than the fact that it's free, is that you can share your list of items with other folks. And there are some wonderful groups on the internet. On Facebook, for example, there's the Ultralight Backpackers group, which I belong to, and people regularly share their list of items from Lighter Pack. And then other people can look at it and go, whoa, look at your tent. You've got a hubba hubba. It's 4 pounds. You could replace that with, a Durston tent or whatever. So people will look at it and make very helpful suggestions. You obviously don't have to take whatever they say. You may have a very good reason for bringing that hubba hubba tent. But it gives you a lot of good feedback and input. And so I think lighterpack.com and having a postage scale are two really, really useful tools. Both have helped me tremendously in getting my pack weight down. So I'm switching here. Uh, you can see my shameless advertisement in the background. I think the only way to really talk about gear is show and tell. So first off, I've got um, what I wear on trail. I don't dress so nice. I wear a sturdy hat. Highly recommend something that keeps the sun and the rain off of you. This is a Tilly hat, which I really like, but Outdoor Research makes some nice ones, and anything sturdy that holds up in the rain. Um, as I said, I wear double socks. So I've got a liner sock, a thin liner, and a thicker outer sock, and I've got two pairs of these. I wear plastic underwear. Here's my underwear. I know we're flashing this on live TV, but plastic lightweight underwear, stuff that you can hang and dry quickly. Nothing cotton, nothing that's going to stay wet. You want it all to be light and quick drying. Plastic pants. These are by Arc'teryx. I think they're about 7 ounces. These are stretchy, which is wonderful. So I really like these pants. I forget what they're called. These are, I don't know. But these are their lightweight hiking, mountaineering, rock climbing pants. But you want to find one that fits and is comfortable. And I have a very worn sun hoodie here by Outdoor Research, their Eco hoodie that I think breathes beautifully. It has a hood when it gets cold. It's long sleeve, so I use less sunscreen, but it breathes really, really nice. And again, lightweight material, quick drying, and something you may not have thought of, but it also smells good. And by smells good, I mean it doesn't build up odors. This is material that 3 days into your hike, when you're all sweaty, you could still put on. You don't feel too bad about wearing it. Um, I've had t-shirts where I've hiked in cotton that 3 days in, I didn't want anywhere near me. So be aware. Odor is another factor when you're through hiking because you may do laundry, but you're not going to do that much laundry. So that's what I wear, and I have only one set of clothes, and I want to stress that. Clothing is really heavy. I wear that every day on trail. I will wash it occasionally. You'll see me wearing my rain gear, washing my clothes. And you can do that, but that's going to cost you half a day to have it dry. That's why you want that quick drying. Or I'll do laundry at a resupply. Red's Meadow has a washing machine. VVR has a washing machine. And the rest of the time, I'll just be stanky. So my clothes. Here's my pack. And if you weigh your pack, and I've weighed mine, this weighs exactly 18 pounds. This is my pack without food or water. So it's what we would call a base weight, 18 pounds. 18 pounds, I think, is pretty good for the JMT. That includes, as you'll see, a bear canister. And some fuel and some other stuff. If you were to be a very strict base weight, it's probably 17 pounds because you wouldn't count the bear can or the fuel. But call it what you like. You still have to carry it. So you can fudge the numbers any way you want. You're still going to carry it. So that's 18 pounds. You'll notice this is a Gregory pack. It's Paragon with a pretty beefy belt. I find when I wear an ultralight pack, if it gets over about 25, over about 30 pounds, I get pain in my leg. I get nerve pain. So ultralight packs like my Durston Aqua, which I love, Durston makes a wonderful pack with a little frame. This has a much lighter belt. So for a short trip where I'm doing 3 days and I'm not carrying a lot of food or a bear can, I love this pack. But for me, for a through hike like the JMT, I want something a little beefier. I think Osprey also makes an excellent pack, but this is something where you need to try it on. But the difference is this Gregory's 3 pounds. This is just over a pound. So you can save a lot of weight by getting a UL pack, but you sacrifice some of the support. So it's an issue depending on what you're going to do. By the way, the Durston from Durston Gear, we'll talk about him some more too. The Kakwa can hold a bear can horizontally. I can get a full bear vault 500 in here sideways, which is a big deal. Vertical bear cans in a backpack, they take up they're very awkward. They take up a lot of space. So it's nice to get a sideways bear can. But as I promised, this 18-pound pack, let's dissect it. Let's see what I've got. So on the outside, I have a little flap for my phone. I like to carry my phone right there on my shoulder pad. REI makes these nice little shoulder things where you can put your phone. I also have my water bottles on the outside, and I have this very convenient hose that goes into my water bottle. I pull this out. Sorry for all the noise. You can see the hose runs in, and this is just a smart water bottle with a little bite valve attachment. I prefer this to a Camelback hydration pack. Why? Because you can't see your Camelback. And to fill the Camelback, you've got to stop, put your pack down, unpack everything, slide it out, and then fill it. It's a pain. And not being able to see it. Can't tell you how many times with the Camelback, I've gotten to a water, like a river. People have said, "Oh, do you need to fill up?" I'm like, "No, I think I still have water." I go another 50 yards down the trail and I run out of water. With a bottle like this, I can just look at it. And if it's empty, I know I need to fill it. I can just slide it out and fill it. I believe this hose attachment for the smart water bottle is made, I think it's a company called One Bottle Hydration. They're expensive. You can get them through Amazon. But there are other companies that make these. You can also just drill a hole in a cap yourself. But this has a nice little valve, so it doesn't tighten the bottle up when you drink from it. I love this thing. So that's my water bottle. I carry a spare water bottle. This I will use with my bidet. I'll also use it as a reserve where I'll have another liter of water. 2 liters of water is plenty for the Sierra. There's water everywhere. You will not run out of water in the Sierra. You'll always be crossing water. I think the longest distance you go between refills is 5 miles coming out of Red's Meadow somewhere. So lots of water in the Sierra. Not the same case if you're PCTing, but in the Sierra, water is plentiful. I carry a sit pad. I like having a little foam pad to sit on. It preserves the seat of my pants. I can use it to keep dust out of the tent when I get in. If the tent gets dusty, I can use it as a scraper to clean the dirt off. It's just multi-use. I find it quite useful. You can buy it online. They're cheap and they're light. That's the outside of my pack. Then let's get into the brain or the top of the pack here. So in the top of my pack, I've got my tent stakes. I keep my tent stakes separate from my tent because they can scrape your tent, punch a hole in it, damage it. So I keep it separate. But these are my tent stakes. These are MSR groundhogs. They're a triangular aluminum stake that I really like. It goes into just about anything and it holds pretty well in most terrain. I highly recommend these stakes. They're also light. I have my first aid kit, and this is not an off-the-shelf first aid kit. I've spent a lot of time going through what I need on trail. So I've got blister stuff, Band-Aids, a little bit of antibiotic ointment. I've also got tenacious tape in here, a tiny scissor, but stuff that I know I need on trail. And I've got moleskin for blisters or sores on my side or whatever. So my first aid, got my Garmin InReach, my little InReach Mini for talking to my wife, or if I had to hitting SOS. I've never had to do that. My InReach Mini handy. I've got my bidet. We talked about this. I keep this in a plastic bag because it's hygienic. This is clean, so we'll open up here. In my bidet kit, I have my bidet. That's all it is. It's a little thing that attaches to your water bottle, just like that. You get it in there. And then you spray water where it's needed. Practice this. If you're going to use a bidet, practice in your shower, know how to use it. Don't have a disaster your first day on trail, but very easy to use. I love this thing. Um, so my bidet, my shovel, you're going to need one of these to dig your cat holes. No bathrooms, well, one or two on the JMT. And I know I'm male, but I have a cooler cloth. Ladies, this is your friend. The cooler cloth is a reusable pee rag. You can wipe yourself, hang it on the back of your pack. It's got silver thread in it, and it'll dry in the sun, be hygienic again, and you can use it over and over. Why do I have one? Because it's hygienic. It has silver thread. And after I wash with the bidet, I can just pat myself dry with this, and I know it'll stay hygienic. And when I get home, I can just wash it. So I carry a cooler cloth. Surprise, surprise. Wonder how many men do. Um, and then my water purification kit. I like the new Platypus quick draw. I think this is great. It has a dirty end and a clean end. It hooks up um, just like the Sawyer. I buy a CNOC bottle. This is something you'll want to buy online. This is worth its weight in gold. Buy one of these. But the CNOC bottle is something that has a little sliding piece and opens up like that. So I can go to a stream or river or lake. I can scoop up my water. I can then seal it back up on this end, right, with this little clip, and then screw this end into the dirty water end of my filter. And then I just roll this down and it pushes the water through. Even if you buy a Sawyer, which comes with, and Sawyer is the competitor to Platypus, and it's equally good. I'm a little bit more of a fan of this. It's easier to back flush, but they're both good. Um, the CNOC bag is better than the bag that comes with Platypus. The Platypus bags often break. The CNOC bag I find much more sturdy. And then you see the other end of the Platypus. I love this. It screws right into your smart water bottle. So I can go next to trail, collect water, and just squeeze it into my bottle, and I've got clean water. So that's how I filter my water on trail. And as I said, this isn't a true base weight. It is 18 pounds. But in my pocket, I have some reusables. I have chapstick. Your lips will get cracked on trail. Please have something with sunscreen for the lips. I have my insect repellent. Just because the bugs are not necessarily bad, I still carry a little bit. Um, they can be bad. I've got my sunscreen. This is enough for about 10 days because I've got the sun hoodie and the hat. And I have some chafing stick. This product is humorously called squirrel nut butter. But as you can imagine, walking 15 miles a day, you get chafing rash down here. Having a little bit of chafing stick makes a huge difference. You can get by with Vaseline, other things. I like this product. I find it quite handy. It's a little, it's like a deodorant stick. But anything you can have for chafing makes a huge difference. Believe me, day after day, it can be it can be a real uncomfortable thing. And then the other side of rain of this, I have a bunch of stuff. I have my rain gear. Rain gear is so critical. You should test yours. Get your rain gear, and when it rains, put it on and go outside and take a 5 mile walk. And when you get home, if you're soaking inside, you've got the wrong rain gear. Too many products don't hold up to rain. I've owned numerous rain jackets. There are many discount ones that just don't work. These rain pants are by Montbell, a wonderful group. They make some really good stuff. These are ultralight. I think, what do they call their Virtus or something? I forgot. But Montbell makes these really nice rain pants. These weigh only a few ounces. They're easy to rip, so you got to be careful with them. But you need rain pants up in the Sierra. And when I'm washing my clothes, this is what I'm wearing. On top, I have a Z-Packs rain gear. Z-Packs is another great company, another great resource. They make this jacket. I hate to tell you this jacket's over $300. This lightweight raincoat. It's not cheap, but it works. I can go out in a storm and not get wet with this. There are cheaper alternatives, Frog Togs, for example. There are some really good pieces of rain gear, but there are also some awful ones. I've had some really bad ones. So I love this jacket by Z-Packs. Not necessarily something everybody's going to buy. I do enough hiking that I can invest in this. But you want good, tried and tested rain gear, even if it's a little heavier. If it works well, that's important. I have a pen, and hidden inside my pen is a needle for sewing things, as well as the pen for writing. And I have paper maps, always have paper maps. And I have my emergency contacts. This is more for search and rescue. If I'm in trouble and someone finds me, this says, hey, how do I find this guy's wife? Where does he live? Blah, blah, blah. So I have emergency contacts here. But, if I needed to call a friend or send a postcard, I have that. So useful. And my permit's in there. All right. Then we get into the main pack. I have a bear can in there. I do not have the dreaded Bear Vault 500. I have a barricade. Now, again, this is, oh, I missed this. In the top of my pack, I have an insect thing. This is a little hood, right? If I open this up, this is worth its weight in gold. And this is light. This is really light. But there we go, right? I can eat dinner. I can sit outside with a raincoat and this hood in a mosquito storm, right? This will save your buns at Tully Hole. Barricade. Barricade makes the best bear cans on the market. This is a Barricade Blazer. It's 750 cubic inches. Compare that to my old Bear Vault, which is heavier and only 700 cubic inches. So you get more space and it's lighter weight. This is 2 pounds. The Bear Vault is 2 pounds, 9 ounces. The difference, though, the Barricade is almost $400. The Bear Vault, I think you get them 50, $60. So there's a difference. Barricade does rent the Blazer. If you're lucky, you can rent one. But there's also a tremendously big resale market for this. In other words, you could buy this for your trip and then sell it to somebody doing the JMT next year. People buy them and sell them. So you can get your money back on it. I prefer how this one opens with a knife or a screw compared to this one, which if it gets a little dust in it or whatever, is really hard to open. Sometimes a credit card is a good trick with the Bear Vault. I'm not knocking Bear Vault. Bear Vault is fine. For most people, it's totally adequate. But for me, since I do so much hiking, I prefer the little higher end barricade. This one, I'll open it with a quarter, right? You know you're safe because the bears don't have quarters. They can't, they don't have pockets, right? So open it up and I have stuff in my barricade, all adding to those 18 pounds. I have that little piece of soap I was talking about. How do I get these little soaps? Well, you could get them at hotels, but I prefer an organic, all natural, biodegradable soap. So I'll buy a bar, I'll stick it in the microwave for 10 seconds and it'll soften right up. And then with a butter knife, I can just slice it into hotel soaps and then it'll cool back down. So just a trick, soap in the microwave. Just don't overdo it because the soap can explode. But 5, 10 seconds, maybe 20 in the microwave, and your soap becomes sliceable. As we talked about, not for water sources, not for bathing in a water source where you're going to create a bunch of contamination and algae. Way away from water source with any soap or hand cleaner, but other people will bring hand sanitizer. That's fine. I have a little bit of a sponge, just a cut off sponge, and a tiny, tiny bit of dish soap for cleaning pots. I almost never need it. Inside a little bag for sanitary reasons, I have my spoon. Now, you can get one of these at McDonald's or Burger King or wherever. It's a plastic spoon. It'll last you your whole trail. If you want a high-end fancy one, you can get one at Starbucks. But there you go, a plastic spoon. It's all I need for eating. I don't have a titanium spork or anything like that, just a plastic spoon. I have another little bag. And in this one, I have my toothbrush and my little mini toothpaste. And, again, there are workarounds. People get powdered toothpaste or whatever. But that's, my hygiene. And I keep it in my barricade because bears can smell. They have a sense of smell that's like 5,000 times better than a dog. They will know if you have anything in your tent. So all this stuff goes into the barricade. So we'll put that aside. Noisy, sorry. Let's see what else I've got in there. Got a big plastic bag in here. This is my rain protection. Everything else in here is inside a trash compactor, a very thick, can't rip this, a thick trash compactor bag, so that in rain or if I fell into a river, everything here is waterproof in a bag. I don't use a pack cover. I just have everything inside a compactor bag, and then I twist it down so nothing can get wet, say if I fall into a stream. Next, I have a dry bag because this is clothing and I don't want my extra clothing getting wet. So I have my extra clothing in a dry bag and we're literally going to go through everything in my bag because I think it's useful. Oh no, you guys didn't know you're going to see the insides of my pack, right? But my dry bag, I have my pillowcase. This is just a tiny stuff sack. And all I do for a pillow at night is I get my poofy jacket and I stick it in here and I put a clean camp shirt over it or my thermals, and that's my pillow. No inflatable pillow, nothing extra, just a stuff sack with some clothing. Works great. I have a pair of lightweight gloves. Can't tell you how miserable it is in hail or snow without gloves. If you're really stuck, your extra socks can work as gloves, but it's nicer to have gloves. These don't weigh much and they're really nice to have. I have a camp shirt. This is the same as the Eco hoodie, but it's short sleeve, really, really lightweight. And that's just because you get into camp, you're sweaty, you may be cold, you want to put on something clean and dry and not smelly in camp. And then this becomes my pillowcase at night. I have my extra socks, right? I told you I carry an extra pair in case they get wet or dirty or whatever. I need that. I have an extra pair of underwear. This is the only thing other than the socks I duplicate because, again, at night in the sleeping bag, you want something clean. Um, I have a little thing for my neck, just a fleece thing to keep my neck warm, and a little hat from Z-Packs makes this one ultralight beanie, but very warm, keep my head warm. Um, I'll sleep in this to keep my head warm. Most of the heat from your body escapes through your head. Having a little beanie to sleep in up at altitude, wonderful. It gets cold at night. I have a packed towel. This is ultralight, dries quickly, and I can wipe myself off, clean my face, all that stuff at camp. I have a pair of silk underwear because it's ultralight. This is long underwear. It keeps my sleeping bag clean. If I'm cold, I can layer up in it or put it under my clothes. But again, ultralight silk. You can buy this at REI or anywhere online. And I have my poofy jacket. This is a down jacket. This is Montbell's Plasma 1000 jacket. It's almost the price. It's not quite. It's a few hundred too, but it's a 1000 grade down, nice warm down jacket. This with rain gear on the outside and my silk underwear on the inside will keep me comfortable down to snowy conditions. If it's going to be really cold and snowy, I will up this to either a Patagonia down sweater or maybe a winter jacket, a true thick winter jacket. But for the JMT, this is adequate. Oh, clothing. Then we get my kitchen, my tent, and my miscellaneous bag. There's more. So my kitchen. This is a jet boil stove. I like the jet boil, and there'll be a lot of discussion online about stoves and what's best. If you're cooking boil in bag meals like I'm doing, jet boil is wonderful because it'll heat water to a boil quickly. If you are doing your own rehydrated meals and you want to cook in the pot, it's an awful stove. It does not simmer well, it doesn't cook well, it's hard to clean and eat out of the pot. Then you want a more traditional stove setup. So I don't recommend this if you're really cooking. But if you're just doing boil and bag, this is great. I've modified this jet boil, and I'll show you how. In the top, I have added a cut-off Nalgene bottle because this cut-off Nalgene, and I just sanded the edge here, this nestles a 4-ounce fuel can perfectly and then fits in the top. So I can get a nice insulated cup for my coffee and cocoa in the morning that's plastic so it doesn't get too hot, but keeps the drink hot. And then, of course, there's the stove inside. And on the bottom, I've replaced, they have a plastic cup here. I've replaced it with the titanium. This is an Evernew titanium cup that just fits nicely on the bottom. And this is where I'll make my soup and I'll make my oatmeal in here and so forth. So I only use water inside the jet boil, and then I can cook my water while I have my food. So I like having these two, the two cups. And the fuel can, as you can see, nestles inside. So I like jet boil. The advantage of jet boil over the traditional stove is it has a heat exchanger, and so it uses far less fuel. I can go 7 days with that little fuel can, making 2 meals a day for one person with this jet boil, 7 days. If I take a traditional stove, that same fuel can will last me only 4 days. You need to do your own experiments with your food to see how long a can lasts you. But the advantage here is I can carry a much lighter, much smaller fuel can. So people criticize the Jetboil. They say, oh, it's a bulky, heavy stove. But the savings in fuel weight makes up for the stove weight and the convenience, the speed at which it boils. So I'm a big fan of this, but there are other options and you can explore them. Like, for example, the Pocket Rocket or the Soto Windmaster, which are both very popular stoves. I carry a Durston X-Mid Pro two-person tent. Even though I'm mostly solo, I like the extra space of the two-person tent because with a two-person tent, I am able to put my backpack and my gear in the rain next to me in the tent, and it's comfortable. I have a lot of space. His one-person tent is plenty roomy, but you can't quite get your backpack in there with you. This is the lightest, easiest to set up trekking pole tent I have ever used. I love it. And if you go hike the PCT now, you'll discover that more than half the tents are Durston X-Mids. They are by far this year the most popular tent on the PCT. This is expensive. It's a Dyneema tent. It'll set you back over $600. He makes a slightly heavier version, the X-Mid 2P, which is under $300, and is also an excellent tent. I've done the JMT, well, twice. I did it in the X-Mid, I guess 1.5 in the X-Mid 2P. So it's an excellent tent. But the 2P is 31 ounces or almost 2 pounds. The Pro is 19 ounces or just a little over a pound. So again, weight savings. This is wonderful. Downside to this tent, it sets up with your trekking poles. You need trekking poles, and it's not freestanding. So if you're on a sheet of granite, you need to get rocks and stake it out. And some people just don't like that. What would I recommend for a tent? If you want a freestanding tent with traditional poles, Big Agnes Tiger Wall is probably the most popular freestanding tent. And if you can get one, Durston now makes the X Dome very popular. I think they're all sold out for the season. But the X Dome is his lightweight freestanding tent. But check out Durston gear. I think you'll be pleased with the stuff he's offering. Not to undercut other people. Six Moon Designs makes some excellent lightweight tents. Z-Packs makes some excellent lightweight tents, and there are others. Nemo makes one. REI has their own in-house brand, but I love Durston's tents. I can't tell you. And the owners of Durston tents are, it's almost like a cult. We could get into this, but I think I've advertised enough for Dan. In my miscellaneous gear, my little miscellaneous pack, this is where I keep all my personal stuff. I've got a baggie here with some dental floss, earplugs if my neighbors are noisy. I have a little tiny knife. I have a nail clipper. After 20 days, you'll probably want to clip your nails. And I have my thread, my needle and thread. And I have bread clips. Why do I have plastic bread clips? Carol, do you know why I've got bread clips?
I haven't used those on trail. I don't know.
Bread clips. Anyone? Why bread clips? Well, maybe somebody got it in the comments.
Hanging stuff? Eh,
Clothespins.
yeah.
Bread clips will clip my clothes to my drying line and hold them there in the wind, right? They've got this double edge here that holds it in. So I bring 9 bread clips with me for when I'm drying my laundry. I swear by these. They're ultralight clothespins. They're wonderful. So they're a trick for you guys. My electronics. I hate the fact that I'm carrying electronics, but I do. I carry a Nightcore 10,000 milliamp battery pack, which is enough for about 7 days of charge the way I use my electronics. which is in airplane mode, sparingly as a camera. This may or may not be enough for you. I don't know. And then I have a charging cable and a little charging adapter because some of these places will have plugs, but not necessarily a USB port. And even if they do, it may not be USB-C. So I carry my own charging adapter, all carefully measured, very lightweight. There is a debate online about battery packs versus solar panels. Solar panels are great, but you need time and sun. And that time is the problem. You need to get into camp by 3 p.m. if you want enough sun to really charge your gear. And then you need to aim the solar panel right at the sun. If it's hazy, if it's rainy, that's not going to work. And just carrying it on your backpack, my experience, and I've tried it, is it doesn't really charge because it's never really getting that good angle of sun. So I've gone to a battery pack. Most PCT hikers use a battery pack for that reason, but some will carry a solar panel. It's an option. Better yet, don't use a phone, don't need to charge things. Be lighter. 50 feet of very lightweight cord. This I could use as extra guy lines, but mostly it's for hanging my laundry. I have a comb, vanity. I comb my hair sometimes. I have a lighter because I just don't trust the piezo lighter in my stove. I have some tissues because, blow your nose. I have an ultralight lamp, right, for at night. And I have medicine, right? This is some antibiotics and stuff and some Advil in case I need medicine. So all that's in my little sack here, my little kind of personal stuff that I keep in my pack. Then we dig in some more, not much left. I have my sleeping pad. Now I sleep better on a thermarest personally, but the Nemo is lighter. This is like 9 ounces. The thermarest is 14. So I've been using the Nemo tensor a lot. I still sleep better on the thermarest. This is personal. You've just got to try sleeping pads and see what you're. Um, and last but not least, my sleeping bag. My sleeping bag, you'll notice, is in a dry bag because this is critical gear. I will not let this get wet. This is a Sea to Summit dry bag. They have a bunch of very clever gear. And this particular piece of gear is a pump sack. So I can use this dry bag. I can take my sleeping bag out, and then I can use this to inflate my air mattress. I fill it with air, and then I roll it up and I inflate the air mattress. I don't use an electric pump because electricity fails. Pump sack won't fail. My sleeping bag inside here, I use a Marmot helium. It's about a little over 2 pounds down. It is a 15-degree bag, and I'm a big fan of it because it has two zippers, one for the hood and one for the bag, and it's extremely roomy. And, I'm pretty big, so I like the room that it has, and it's a 15-degree bag, which I think for the Sierra is what you want. If you really get cold, maybe a 0-degree bag. I hear people say, can I bring a 30-degree bag to the Sierra? Yes, if you're going to wear your jacket and everything else inside it, because it gets cold at night up there. I think a 15 hits all the possible temperature ranges. You can always open it up. So that's a Marmot helium. If you're going to go Cadillac bags, Western Mountaineering makes the Versalite. That's a 10-degree bag, but that'll set you back $700. It's lighter than the helium, and it's a really, really nice bag. They also make the Cloud Light. That's a little heavier, but it's wider. The Versalite's a very narrow bag. Why don't I have a Versalite? It's too narrow for me. Why don't I have a Cloud Light? Because it just came out, and I like my Marmot bag. On the practical side, REI now has a bag called the Magma. It's a 15-degree bag. It comes in nine different sizes. It's got tall, short, wide, thin, regular. So you can get a fitted bag. It's very affordable. I think it's $400. It's lightweight. It's well reviewed. So the REI Magma is kind of your practical bag or borrow gear. Nothing wrong with borrowing gear. Anyway, that's everybody. If you want to see my liner bag, right? That's everybody in my pack. But that's my 18 pounds of gear. And then you add the food. Food is another pound a day and the water. That's what I would carry on the JMT. So I'm ready for Q&A. So the question is, I'm a 20-year-old woman. I've got backpacking experience, but I'm going to go solo on the JMT. What advice can you offer me? A few things. First off, you're going to meet wonderful, wonderful folks on the JMT. You're probably going to get into what's called a tramley, a trail family of people just like you in similar situations, hiking at about the same pace, and you may make some of your best lifelong friends. I know Carol, for example, has a little circle of people she hikes with now who she's met on trail. So you're going to make some wonderful connections. You will not be alone out there at all. And the people are 99% wonderful people out on trail. So you're going to have a great time. Um, you can, by the way, if you want a real solo wilderness experience, you can get that too. I don't want to say the JMT is all social. You camp in a less popular spot, you hike half a mile off trail, you're on your own. So if you really want that wilderness experience, you can get it also out there. But on trail, on the main trail, there'll be a lot of folks and many folks your age also going solo. You're going to have a wonderful time. Safety wise, that InReach Mini is your best friend. You can turn on tracking and map sharing, and your folks or your family or your friends who you allow can see where you are every day. If you're on schedule, you can check in with them by sending, hey, I'm okay messages. And if they don't get one, they'll know exactly where you stopped, where to find you, and what your plan was. And if you provide them, say, with Lizzie Wank's book and who to call, they'll know who to call in an emergency. So that's a safety thing, but I really recommend it at your age where I know I'm a parent, I worry about my children. I'd want to have that tracking so I knew where you were. I don't know your particular dynamic, but having somebody responsible, able to check on you is a good thing while you're out there on trail. But most off, have fun. You're going to have the trip of your lifetime. You're going to love it. So the question is, I'm worried about my exits. Where can I safely get off trail? What are the best exits? So two things. First, on your back issue. Again, I'm not a doctor, but your choice of backpacks and how you pack your backpack is going to make a huge difference. For example, you can take your sleeping mat, like a thermarest, and use it to line the back of your backpack as a pad and make your backpack more cushiony. Some backpacks have a better belt and better suspension system than others. In your case with back issues, it may be better to get a heavier pack, maybe a 4-pound pack that has a really good belt and suspension system. So it's taking the weight off your back, putting it on your hips, and making you comfortable. And the only way to figure that out is to go try them on. REI, for example, will let you try on backpacks, load them up with weight and all that, and take them out for a spin. But I really recommend playing with backpacks because a good backpack makes a huge difference, particularly if you already have an injury. Now, to answer your question about exits, I'm going to punt on that and tell you to purchase Lizzie Wank's book. She details every exit from the JMT. She describes them, which are better, which are worse, what are the conditions. And you can go through there and read about them and choose which ones you feel are appropriate and not appropriate for yourself. It's more than I can probably go over in a list here. But and her book is at the library. You could sit down in REI and thumb through it. But um, she goes through all that in beautiful detail, and it's well worth researching. I commend you for looking at that ahead of time. I hope you have a wonderful hike. The question is, what should I do about food? How far away from my tent should I cook? Where should I store my bear canister? So, to answer the first question, you do want to cook a bit away from your tent, both for the fire safety reason, but also because you don't want the smell of food getting into your tent. You don't need to be tremendously far away. I typically will get 20 feet, 30 feet away from my tent, find a nice circle where I can set up my kitchen and cook. But I do cook away from the tent. And you can imagine if you spilled food or something, you'd want that to be far enough away that if a bear or animal came scavenging, it wouldn't be in your tent. It would be far enough away that you're comfortable. So it's as far away as you're willing to walk, but 20, 30 feet is quite adequate. For the bear canister, there are some, it's a great question about where to put it. First, never put it next to a stream or water because bears do come and play with them, and it could knock it into the stream and your canister would float away. There's a very famous bear in Yosemite that's learned to knock canisters off cliffs and then go down to get the food from the broken canister. So don't put it next to a cliff. Ideally, secure your canister, say, in the shelter of some trees or something, where if a bear knocks it around, it's not going to go rolling, or in some bushes or whatever. I like to put my canister at least 100 feet from my tent. I like it close enough that if a bear did come and started knocking it around, I'd hear it. I'd wake up and then I'd go chase the bear away. On the other hand, I don't want it so close that a bear is going to come to me. And I certainly would not put it in my tent. That's a huge mistake. And not just bears. You'll get marmots, mice, skunks, raccoons, squirrels, chipmunks will eat through your tent. You do not want anything with an odor in your tent. So for me, about 100 feet away and away from places that it could get damaged or lost. So the question is, how close can you camp to the base of Whitney? So presumably she's talking about wanting to summit Whitney, maybe catch the sunrise, but to go up with the least trouble. Um, so I personally like to camp at Crabtree Ranger Station. I like Crabtree Ranger Station because you've got the ranger there. They have a toilet of sorts, no privacy in that toilet. And it's a nice place. There's water and community. However, it's not that close to the base of Whitney. The spot that most hikers will camp if they want to summit Whitney from the base is a place called Guitar Lake. And that's probably the closest you're going to get. The downside to Guitar Lake is it's popular for all those reasons. So the water sometimes gets a little polluted, a little dirty. You need to be careful about your hygiene and you need to camp away from the lake. So there are some downsides to Guitar Lake, but that would probably be the best place if you want to get as close as you can to Whitney with water and a reasonably sheltered spot. And you'll find that on your map. Have a great time out there. This is a trip of the lifetime. You're going to love the JMT. The photos I showed do not do justice to the experience, the awe, the majesty of being out there in the high Sierra. You're going to love your trip. And I can't even begin to tell you all the different directions it'll take you in life. It's certainly been transformational for me. And Carol, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I thank you all for coming.